Hello and welcome to the Falling Knife Project, where I'm trying to turn 25K into 750. Today's subject is going to be on overfitting. This is the first of a two-part series on this topic, and the first part today is going to be mostly my current mindset, and I'm going to step through an example of what I would consider potentially okay. And then the second part of the video is going to be more objective ways to assess whether one is overfit or not. Before I get started, this is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor, and this is for entertainment purposes only. So when I first started trading, I was scared to death to adding any filters, using any signals. I just felt like everything was going to be overfit. And as I've gotten more comfortable and figured out kind of where the edges and signals lie, I've kind of done a 180 and I'm perfectly fine with adding filters. Now, the big thing about adding filters for me is that I better have a sound hypothesis or thesis as to why this filter or signal that I'm adding works, and why it either flips a trade from being negative expectancy to positive, or ideally takes a positive expectancy trade and enhances it. And that's really the ideal setup. And what I prefer would be to have a positive expectancy trade that I would call a core trade, and then enhance it with a signal or a filter. Okay, and I'm going to show you what I mean in a second here. So here's the trade that I have on the screen. This is actually selling premium. I know most of my videos have been long volatility. This would be considered short volatility. This is selling an iron condor, $1.50 credit on the call and the put with $150 wide wings, 0 days to expiration. I'm opening a trade at 10 a.m. and 1:15 p.m. Stop loss is my main risk mitigation or risk management system in this trade. Not my favorite method of risk management, but that's what it is for this trade. And I'm stopping out at 95% of the original credit. You can see I added some slippage there as well. So this trade, and again, full disclosure, I do not trade this setup, but I do know that others trade it. It's just not my favorite setup. So P&L on the back test, and this was from the start of dailies, $15,000, capture rate 5.6%. I'm retaining $8 per lot, and I open 1,951 trades. Here's what the equity curve looks like. Pretty solid, right? Now let's hypothesize that if VIX increases overnight, so if volatility increases overnight, that maybe premiums will be a little bit more juiced and institutions will be a little bit more willing to pay more for the premium, which we're selling in this case. And it might make volatility risk premium a little bit easier to harvest, which again is kind of what this trade does. So I've created and ran already the same exact back test, but added that filter, VIX overnight move up. And we'll just toggle between the outputs here. And you can see how they perform. So the original trade, $15,000. The filtered or signal-based trade went to $13,359. And you might say, well, the back test didn't make as much money in the filtered trade, but I'll show you why I prefer the filtered trade in a second. Capture rate, 8.6% in the filtered trade. It was only 5.6 in the original. Going from 5.6 to 8.6 is huge on the capture rate. And again, that's the amount of premium that we're retaining. So average per trade that we're keeping went from $8 to $12. Again, that's huge. And my favorite thing to look at here is that I had to open up 1,951 trades, and now I only had to open up 1,121 trades. And when selling premium, I feel like I'm exposed to additional risk, especially if I'm using stop losses as my risk management tool. So I would highly prefer to take far fewer trades for a similar amount of profit. So this would be one, if I were running this setup, that I would, consider keeping this filter. You can look at the equity curves as well. They are very similar. The only thing I would see here is in this filter trade, you can just see it's a little bit tighter, it's a little bit less volatile. Okay. One thing I didn't mention yet that I think is pretty critical is that when I do add filters or signals to trade, I assume that my max drawdown on the signal-based trade is going to end up being the same as the core trade. Okay, so this is the signal-based 2.2. My drawdown, I assume I'm going to hit that 2.6% drawdown. So I just go ahead and assume that I'm overfit. Same with the capture rate, 8.6%. I figure I'm going to be somewhere between that 5.6% capture rate and 8.6%. But here's the beauty of having a core trade that is positive expectancy, is that if there's a regime change or this signal is just a false signal and I'm totally wrong, I still have this core trade to fall back on. So at a minimum, I would expect that hopefully I would still achieve this 5.6% capture rate. All right, so that's my current philosophy kind of on overfitting of trades. Hope you enjoyed this video and tune in for the second part.